Hey there, this is Javid, your friendly neighborhood literature teacher, back again with another video. This week, let us discuss about the poem Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson. The poem consists of 4 stanzas, 3 of which are a flattery of the protagonist named Richard Cory, which means that the poet has attempted to glorify this character. The poet has also taken an unconventional approach and made a male protagonist the subject of this poem, opposing to the countless poems which talks about female attributes and curves of women. Like all literary works, there is a hidden meaning behind the poem, and the poem is packed with literary devices and technique. And before we talk about the wording of the poem, let us look at the organization. The poem consists of 4 uniform stanzas, and the rhyming scheme of the poem is known as AB, which means that the first and third and the second and fourth lines of each stanza ends with rhyming words. So with no further ado, let us jump on the first stanza. When Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. Not only does the opening line introduces us to the protagonist, but it also foreshadows an interesting fact. Notice that the line is in simple past tense. It reads, Richard Cory went downtown, not goes downtown. Hence, the poet implies that for some reason, Richard Cory does not go there anymore. This technique is known as foreshadowing and is highly regarded and very advantageous. Foreshadowing is a literary technique which hints the end result or the outcome of a series of events. It should also be noted that there is a generous use of symbolism used in the first stanza, which is another literary device. Richard Cory is the symbol of the upper class, and we the people on the pavement is the symbol of the lower class. The pavement is far from luxury and invokes poverty and underprivilege. So obviously the poet has capitalized on the contrast of class. Let's look at the word downtown here. The word downtown has 2 meanings. Downtown is the commercially active area in the city. So we can assume that Richard Cory was a businessman, owing that he was often present in a commercially active area. However, we could argue that the word downtown is a symbol of poverty and grief, with the word down. Perhaps downtown is the area where the poor and the lower class lingered. The appearance of Richard Cory is evident through the wording, he was a gentleman from soul to crown. Notice that the line is also in past tense. So he was a gentleman, not he is. Soul to crown is another way of saying top to bottom. So he appeared as a gentleman from top to bottom. The word sole is the bottom part of his foot, but it also recalls another meaning. The homophone soul, which is S-O-U-L, comes to mind, applying that Richard Cory was far from sin and he was a pure soul. Although crown here means the top of the head, the use of the word crown also evokes a royal feeling, which can be paired with the word imperially. Imperially means majestic or magnificent and relating to a royal atmosphere. So the word crown and imperially are well calculated and premeditated, which describes a royal presence of Richard Cory. Which brings us to the final line of the stanza, clean-favored and imperially slim. Again, the poet implies that Richard Cory favored clean things or things away from sin. The word clean here also has 2 meanings. For example, you could say that she is a clean girl, and that can mean that she is either hygienic or that she has committed no sin and perhaps is a virgin. The wording imperially slim talks about Richard Cory's build, posture and the way he carries himself, implying he had a royal aura. Which brings us to the second stanza. Off the bat, the noticeable literary technique here is repetition, where the same words or phrases are repeated during intervals, which is the phrase, "and he always." Again, the phrase has been repeated twice in a short interval. Let's take a look at the interesting wording, quietly arrayed. The meaning of the word arrayed is the means of how a person dressed. Hence, Richard Cory dressed in such a humble and modest way that it was seldom talked about. He didn't dress in a gaudy or extravagant way. He never roamed in loud clothing. Rather, he dressed in a simple outfit from top to bottom. The second line reads, "And he was human when he talked," which means he spoke in a humane manner and didn't consider himself superior to anyone else. So the first half of this stanza makes it clear that Richard Cory never attempted to demand respect or authority and that he was humble. Nevertheless, Richard Cory was valued in the community of the downtown people, and this is evident through the third and fourth lines. But still, he fluttered pulses when he said, "Good morning," and glittered when he walked. This further establishes the importance of Richard Cory. The mere act of being greeted "Good morning" by Richard Cory was enough to flutter pulses. Fluttering pulse means someone's heart beating rapidly, which means excitement and thrill. So the idea here is just a mere good morning from Richard Cory was enough to excite and thrill people. Richard Cory had such a magnitude of importance, and he glittered when he walked is a powerful literary technique known as hyperbole, which is a form of exaggeration. Richard Cory doesn't obviously glitter when he walks. Rather, he is a high-profile individual that he is instantly noticeable in public. That it is as if he was glittering. As the second stanza ends with hyperbole, the third stanza begins with it. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king. It is easy to understand the word rich and richer is repetition. Obviously, Richard Cory wasn't richer than a king, and that is why this is known as hyperbole. Rather, the narrator assumes that Richard Cory is a very wealthy individual. And the reason that I use the word assume here is because he can't say for sure if Richard Cory was truly rich. Again, this is how the community perceived Richard Cory. Admirably schooled in every grace means that Richard Cory was taught good manners, and he acted with those values. Apart from that, there is another hidden meaning here when you focus on the wording admirably schooled. Perhaps Richard Cory had attended a prestigious college. Let us focus our attention to the word schooled. Using the word schooled opposing to the word educated implies that his parents had paid for his schooling. Simply because one cannot school himself. We school our children. We don't school ourselves. So it is safe to assume that Cory came from a wealthy family and his fortune was inherited rather than earned, owing to the fact that his parents were able to school him in a prestigious school. Look at the final part of the third stanza. Again, this can be perceived in two ways. In fine means in short. We thought he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. This line shows us that the narrator and his community envied Cory and wanted to live a life like him. However, when looked at closely, we thought he was everything stands out. Perhaps he was everything to the community and was such a positive influence and a charismatic personality. He was simply everything to the people and was the people's champion, perhaps. Let us take a moment to summarize what we have learned so far. This poem has 4 stanzas. with the rhyming scheme AB, AB. The first three lines are a flattery of Richard Cory, who was a modest, humble, and generous gentleman. However, the final stanza shifts the ground. All of a sudden, the narrator starts talking about his own class, which is the most powerful part of the poem. So on we worked and waited for the light. Here, the light is a symbol for hope and a bright future. However, the hidden meaning here hints that the workers worked in the dark. Perhaps they were miners, and as of the time of this poem, miners were devastated due to an economical depression. Maybe the poet attempts to showcase this. The next line reads, "And went without meat and cursed the bread." Not only does this line talks about the starvation of the workers, but this line too has a hidden meaning. The word bread here talks about the financial situation of the workers. I'm sure you've heard of the word breadwinner. Here, bread is a term used for finances. So the workers cursed their profession or the means of how they made money. Look again at the word bread. It is a homophone of the word bread, which is B-R-E-D, which is the past tense of the word breed. Perhaps the workers are cursing their own breed and their very own birth. The final two lines of the final stanza shifts the mood again. Now the poet is offering us a flashback with a simple visual imagery. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. There is a dark humor involved in these final lines. The act of death is given a sinister simplicity. Now, if you know people who live in America, you know that summer nights are the most calming and beautiful nights out of all the seasons. Summer is never associated with death. Look at how simply the narrator narrates Cory's death. He put a bullet in his head, just like putting a book in a shelf or putting a cake in the oven. A simple act. And where did Cory commit suicide? In his home. Was there no one there to stop him? Did he live alone? Or did the people whom he lived with not care about him? These are all valid questions. But what can you get out of the poem? What is the message here? Well, for starters, look at how the narrator valued Richard Cory when he was alive. 3 stanzas talked about how great Richard Cory was, how charming and how charismatic, how modest and how kind, how down to earth he was. But the narrator only spares 2 measly lines when he talks about Cory's suicide. And he does not acknowledge the fact that he is sad because of Cory's death. Is Cory worthless when he is dead? Will the people who cherish us when we are amongst them forget us when we are gone? Which brings us to the age-old cliché, never judge a book by its color. And wealth does not equal happiness. The narrator had no idea about what made Cory take his life, and neither do we. But the real message we should milk out of this is, how many Richard Corys are out there? Are you another Richard Cory? Or am I another Richard Cory? I guess we'll never know until it's too late.